The candle slipped from his rough hands, rolling across the counter before stopping by the register. 34-year-old Jack Turner sighed, voice low, "Forget it. I'll put them back. My boy won't mind." The line fell silent. A child somewhere hummed "Happy Birthday," cutting deeper than any knife. Jack turned to leave, until a calm, confident voice behind him said, "Wait. Add the candles back, and double them." He froze. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. The grocery store lights buzzed softly above, pale and tired, much like the man standing in line. Jack Turner, 34, single father, mechanic, and survivor of too many rough days, stared at the box of birthday candles in his trembling hand. They cost $3.49, a small price for anyone else, but tonight it might as well have been 30. He placed the candles on the counter, then sighed and pushed them aside. "Forget it," he murmured to the cashier. "I'll leave those." Behind him, a child in another line hummed the "Happy Birthday" song. The sound hit like a punch. Jack forced a smile, pretending not to care, while inside, something twisted. His son Owen had been talking about his birthday for weeks, about the cake, the candles, the wish. But wishes didn't pay bills. Then a calm, confident voice said from behind him, "Add the candles back. And ring up a second box." Jack turned. A woman stood there, tall, graceful, maybe early 30s, her dark coat tailored perfectly, eyes bright yet kind. There was something effortless about her, like she belonged in places he'd never even stepped foot in. "Every child deserves light on their birthday," she said softly, handing her black card to the cashier. Jack blinked. "You don't have to do that," he said quietly. "I know," she replied with a small smile, "but I want to." The cashier hesitated, then finished the purchase. The box beeped twice, once for his son, once for something larger. When the woman handed the bag to him, Jack could only whisper, "Thank you." "Just make sure he makes a wish," she said, her tone gentle but warm. By the time Jack looked up again, she was gone, leaving behind only the soft echo of her perfume and a receipt with her name printed neatly at the bottom, Grace Whitmore. He didn't know it yet, but that single act of kindness, 2 boxes of candles, would change the course of both their lives. That night, the city outside Jack's apartment glowed faintly through cracked blinds, streetlights flickering, sirens distant, the sound of rain against tin. Inside, the only light came from a small kitchen table where Owen sat, elbows on the surface, chin resting on his hands. "Dad," he asked softly, "did you get the candles?" Jack smiled, weary but determined. "Yeah, buddy. And we've got 2 boxes, that means double wishes." Owen's eyes went wide. "Really? 2 wishes?" "2, Jack nodded, lighting the candles on a small cupcake. The flame flickered weakly but bright enough to fill the room. "Go on, make them count." The boy squeezed his eyes shut and whispered, "I wish for my dad to have a good job again." Jack froze, the match burning down to his fingers. He blew it out quickly, hiding the sting in his throat behind a laugh. "Hey, I think that one's on the list for next year," he said. But Owen shook his head. "You always say next year. I think it's time now." When Owen fell asleep later, curled up with his blanket and toy truck, Jack sat at the table staring at the crumpled receipt. Grace Whitmore. The name was neat, printed with precision, next to the logo of a high-end logistics firm, Whitmore Logistics. He pulled out his old laptop, cracked screen flickering to life. A quick search brought up articles, business awards, and her face, the same woman from the grocery store. CEO. Forbes 40 under 40. Billion-dollar company. Jack leaned back, stunned. The woman who bought his son's candles ran one of the biggest logistics firms in the state, a company that handled the kind of routes and supply systems he used to dream of working on before life got smaller, harder. He stared at her photo, reading the caption beneath it. Grace Whitmore, building connections that keep the world moving. A strange feeling settled in his chest. Maybe fate had just handed him one of its rare, quiet chances. Jack whispered into the silence, maybe it's time I start moving too. The next morning, Jack stood in front of the gleaming glass building of Whitmore Logistics, his reflection small in the vast doors. He almost turned back twice. He wasn't dressed for this, a faded work jacket, scuffed boots, the smell of engine oil clinging to him. But he'd made a promise to himself last night, to at least thank her. Inside, the lobby was a cathedral of glass and chrome. Polished floors. Coffee machines that hissed like luxury. The receptionist looked up with a professional smile. "Good morning, sir. Do you have an appointment?" No, ma'am. I just wanted to thank Ms. Whitmore. She helped me last night at a grocery store." The woman blinked. "Ms. Whitmore," she repeated, like she wasn't used to hearing her boss's name spoken by anyone without a calendar invite. "Yes, ma'am," Jack said, awkward but sincere. Just wanted to tell her it meant something. Before the receptionist could respond, an elevator behind her opened. Grace Whitmore stepped out, mid-conversation with two assistants, coffee in hand, heels tapping sharp against the floor. Her eyes lifted, and then she stopped. Recognition flashed across her face. "You," she said, surprised but smiling. "From the store." Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "Didn't mean to interrupt your morning. Just wanted to say thanks. You made my kid's birthday." Her expression softened. "You came all the way here just for that?" "Well," he admitted, "I also saw the sign. Logistics company, right? I used to work in distribution routing, small firm, local jobs mostly." Grace tilted her head. "We're actually holding open interviews today. If you have experience, you should apply." Jack hesitated. "I didn't come looking for a handout. And I'm not offering one," she said evenly. "Just an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you." There was something steady in her tone, not pity, but respect. The kind of tone he hadn't heard in years. After a long pause, Jack smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'd be a fool not to take it." As she handed him a visitor badge, their fingers brushed briefly, and though neither said it, both of them felt the spark of something that wasn't just gratitude. It was possibility. Jack sat in the waiting area surrounded by people in pressed suits and polished shoes. He tugged at his sleeve, trying to smooth the grease stain that refused to fade. Around him, the quiet hum of ambition filled the air, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, muffled laughter from offices above. A young woman in HR smiled politely. "Mr. Turner? Ms. Whitmore asked that you be seen next." His heart kicked once, hard. He stood, adjusting his jacket as if that might make him look like someone who belonged there. When he stepped into the glass-walled office, Grace was already at her desk. Sunlight poured behind her, making her look almost unreal, calm, precise, powerful. But when she looked up and met his eyes, there was warmth there, not the cold efficiency he expected. "I didn't think you'd actually show," she said, setting down her pen. "I almost didn't," Jack admitted. "Figured you had enough people lined up in suits who know the right words." "Maybe," she said. "But suits don't always know what real work looks like." She leaned forward slightly. "Your resume says you managed regional routes for CalWest Freight before they downsized. That's not small-time work." Jack nodded. "Wasn't fancy, but we kept food moving across half the state. I miss that, fixing things that matter." Grace studied him for a long moment, then smiled. "We're expanding our humanitarian operations division, focusing on emergency logistics and relief shipments. It's not glamorous, but it's good work. Would you be interested? He blinked, caught off guard. You'd really take a chance on someone like me? I'm not taking a chance, she said softly. I'm making an investment. Something in her tone made the room feel smaller, quieter, as if they were the only two people in the city who understood what it meant to start over. Jack exhaled slowly. Then I'll give you everything I've got. Good, Grace said, standing to shake his hand. Because sometimes, the best hires aren't the ones who fit the mold, they're the ones who remember what it's like to build from nothing. As he left her office, badge in hand, Jack realized he hadn't just gotten a job. He'd been seen, really seen, for the first time in years. And though he didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of something that would change both of their lives. The morning of his first day, Jack's hands wouldn't stop shaking, not from fear, but from disbelief. He'd spent years covered in oil and dust, watching other people climb ladders while he tightened bolts at the bottom. Now, for the first time in a long while, he was walking through glass doors that didn't close in his face. The humanitarian logistics division was smaller than he imagined, a few cubicles, stacks of supply maps, and walls lined with photos of disaster zones and relief convoys. It wasn't glamorous, but it was purpose. Grace met him there, holding a mug of coffee in each hand. You're early, she said, offering him one. Old habit, Jack replied. Can't fix what you don't show up for. That made her laugh, a sound that was softer than her public image suggested. You'll fit right in. As the day unfolded, Jack found his rhythm again. Route plans, inventory projections, fuel ratios, things that had once been routine but now felt like oxygen. He noticed how Grace worked, direct but fair, never barking orders, just asking the right questions. She didn't act like a CEO looking down, she acted like a leader reaching across. At lunch, she stopped by his desk. You've already solved the delivery delay in Sector 9? Jack shrugged. It was just a scheduling overlap. Happens when people don't talk to each other. Grace smiled knowingly. Then maybe I finally hired someone who does. He grinned back. Careful, Ms. Whitmore. You'll make me think I belong here. Her voice softened. You do, Jack. That afternoon, as he left the building, the city felt different, brighter, lighter. He picked up Owen from school, and when his son asked how his new job went, Jack just smiled and said, Buddy, I think we're finally building something again. But that night, as he emptied his pockets onto the counter, the crumpled receipt from that grocery store slipped free and fluttered to the floor. He stared at the faint name, Grace Whitmore, and realized something strange. The woman who had helped him find light for his son's birthday was now the one helping him find it for himself. And somewhere deep down, a small voice whispered that fate wasn't finished yet. Weeks passed, and what started as gratitude began to grow into something neither of them expected. Grace and Jack worked side by side on the new outreach division, long hours mapping disaster relief routes, late nights reviewing reports while the city lights shimmered below the office windows. Jack noticed things about her, small, human details hidden beneath the polished CEO image. The way she rubbed her temples when the meetings dragged on. How she always added sugar to her coffee but never stirred it. And once, when she laughed too hard at one of his stories about Owen, she covered her mouth, as if laughter wasn't something she allowed herself often. Grace noticed things too. The way Jack spoke about his son with quiet pride. How he treated every warehouse worker by name, shaking hands with the same respect he gave her. He was grounded in a world she'd long since left behind. And somehow, being around him made her remember who she used to be before the boardrooms and headlines, before she learned to measure worth in profits instead of people. One evening, after everyone else had gone home, Grace found him at his desk sketching a delivery plan on a napkin. Still here? She asked, setting her coat on the chair beside him. Couldn't sleep, Jack said. So I figured I'd fix something that doesn't talk back. She smiled faintly. And here I thought CEOs had the monopoly on insomnia. He looked up at her, the glow of the desk lamp softening the lines of his tired face. You ever wish you could start over? He asked quietly. Grace hesitated. Every day. Then maybe we're both overdue, he said, half joking, half honest. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was warm, suspended. When she finally stood, she said softly, "Don't stay too late, Jack. The world needs people like you awake in the morning." As she left, Jack leaned back in his chair, heart pounding harder than it should have. He didn't know if it was admiration, gratitude, or something deeper, but whatever it was, it scared him as much as it steadied him. For the first time in years, life didn't feel like surviving. It felt like beginning. 2 months into the job, Jack had become more than just an employee, he was the quiet heartbeat of Grace's new division. Shipments moved faster. Teams worked smoother. Even the board began noticing. One morning, Grace called him into her office. The skyline stretched behind her like a painted horizon. "Jack," she began, "I wanted to tell you personally, the humanitarian branch you helped design? It's being greenlit. Fully funded." He grinned. "That's incredible." "It's because of you," she said simply. "You reminded me what this company was supposed to stand for." But just as he was about to thank her, Grace's phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at it, then froze. The message read, "He deserves to know what your father did." Jack noticed her expression change, the confidence in her eyes replaced by something heavier. "Everything okay?" he asked. She locked the screen quickly, forcing a small smile. "Just bored nonsense. Nothing to worry about." But she was lying, and he could sense it. Later that night, Jack stayed late to finish the week's transport audit. On his way out, he passed her darkened office, and something caught his eye. Her phone, still lit up on the desk. Another message flashed. "You know the truth. He's Robert Turner's son." Jack's breath caught. Robert Turner. His father. The man who'd spent his last years doing odd jobs, who'd always told him, "Kindness circles back, son. You'll see." Hands shaking, Jack scrolled through the rest of the email displayed on the screen. It wasn't from an investor, it was from an old family contact of Grace's. The message continued. "Her father owed yours his life. After the accident at the docks, your dad helped rebuild the Whitmore estate supply line. Without him, they'd have lost everything." Jack stepped back, the pieces clicking together. Grace had known exactly who he was, from the moment in that grocery store. When she appeared in the doorway, her voice broke the silence. "I wanted to tell you," she said quietly. "But I didn't know how." Jack turned to face her, hurt flickering beneath his calm. "So this job, all of it, was because you felt guilty?" "No," she said, stepping closer. "Because I wanted to honor what your father did for mine. He gave my family a future. I just wanted to return what was owed." He stared at her, torn between gratitude and anger. "My father never helped people to get something back," he said softly. "He helped because it was right." Grace's voice trembled. "And that's exactly why I wanted to do this, because he made me believe people like that still exist." The words hung in the air, heavy and true. Jack took a slow breath. "I don't know what to think right now." "Then think about this," Grace whispered. "Maybe fate doesn't pay debts. Maybe it just gives us another chance to do the right thing." For a long moment, neither moved. The city hummed below, unaware that in one office high above it, 2 lives, bound by a kindness decades old, had just changed forever. The next morning, the office felt colder than usual. Jack kept his head down, avoiding Grace's gaze as he passed her glass-walled corner. Every step echoed with questions he couldn't silence. Had she hired him out of guilt? Out of gratitude? Or because she actually believed in him? By noon, he was out at the loading docks, clipboard in hand, pretending to check shipments. In truth, he just needed air. His phone buzzed, a message from Grace. "Please come to my office. We need to talk." He almost ignored it, but something in the tone of those words pulled him upstairs. When he entered, she was standing by the window, no heels, no armor, just Grace. Her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "I understand why you're angry," she began. "But you need to know the whole story." Jack crossed his arms. "Then tell me." She took a breath. "Years ago, my father's company went bankrupt after a shipping accident. Your dad, Robert Turner, was the foreman who stayed behind when everyone else walked out. He helped rebuild the entire route network. And when my father had nothing left to pay him with, your dad refused money. He just said, one day, pass it on." Jack stared, jaw tight. "He never told me that." "He wouldn't have," Grace said softly. "Men like your father didn't brag about kindness. They just lived it." Silence settled between them, heavy but calm. Grace stepped closer. "When I saw your name that night at the store, I didn't plan anything. But when I realized who you were, I couldn't ignore it. Your father's compassion saved my family. I wanted to honor that, not out of guilt, but because it reminded me who I wanted to be." Jack let the words sink in. The anger in his chest began to loosen, replaced by something quieter, understanding. "You didn't owe me anything," he said finally. "I know," Grace replied. "But maybe I needed to do it anyway." He looked at her, really looked, not at the CEO, but at the woman behind the name. Someone who'd spent years carrying her own regrets, just like him. Jack exhaled slowly. "My dad used to say good deeds are like lanterns. They might go out for a while, but someday the wind brings them back to life." Grace smiled faintly. "Then maybe this is one of those days." They stood there, two people connected by a flame neither had lit, both realizing that kindness never really disappears, it just waits for the right moment to return. Days later, something shifted between them, quiet, unspoken, but real. The tension of secrets had given way to purpose. The story of their fathers wasn't a wall between them anymore. It was a bridge. Grace called an emergency meeting with the executive board that Monday. The room was full of polished voices and skeptical eyes. Jack stood at her side, nervous but steady, a folder in his hand labeled Project Ember. Grace began, her voice clear and commanding. "Whitmore Logistics was built to move goods," she said, "but it's time we start moving goodness." She nodded to Jack. "Mr. Turner will explain." Jack's throat felt dry, but when he looked at Grace, her subtle smile grounded him. He spoke simply, without the buzzwords or showmanship the room was used to. Project Ember is a new outreach branch, one that delivers supplies to struggling families, shelters, and small towns hit by crisis. No red tape, no profit margin. Just help, fast and quiet. The room murmured. A few executives exchanged doubtful glances. One man scoffed. "Charity isn't logistics," he said flatly. "We're not a relief agency." Jack met his gaze. "Maybe not. But when you've seen people lose everything, you learn that kindness moves faster than money ever will." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Grace leaned forward, her tone sharp as glass. "I support this project fully," she said. "And since I sign the checks, it begins today." By the time the meeting ended, whispers followed them down the hall, some critical, some amazed. But neither of them cared. That evening, Grace found Jack loading boxes himself in the warehouse. "Didn't think CEOs were supposed to get their hands dirty," he teased. "Someone has to make sure you're not stealing the good tape," she said, smiling. They worked side by side under the hum of fluorescent lights, two worlds, once divided, now moving as one. When the first delivery truck rolled out at dawn, its cargo full of blankets and food, a small quote was stamped on every box. "Even broken wax deserves a flame." Jack watched the trucks disappear into the sunrise, the air smelling faintly of coffee and asphalt. Grace stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes soft. "Your father would be proud," she whispered. He turned to her, voice low. "So would yours." For the first time, she didn't correct him. She just smiled, not the polished CEO smile, but something real, fragile, human. And for a heartbeat, Jack felt it, the quiet spark that kindness leaves behind when it finds its way home. A week later, the city was alive with motion, trucks from Project Ember rolling through neighborhoods, volunteers wearing Whitmore Logistics jackets, and news outlets calling it the company with a conscience. Jack didn't care about the headlines. He cared about the faces. He cared about the mother who cried when she opened a box of food and found a note inside that read, "You're not forgotten." He cared about the kids chasing the trucks as they left, waving to the drivers like heroes. Grace watched all of it from the warehouse floor, her heels abandoned, sleeves rolled up. For once, she looked nothing like a CEO. She looked free. Jack approached her, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You're getting good at this," he said with a grin. "I could say the same to you," she replied, brushing dust off her jacket. "You built something that matters, Jack." He shook his head. "We did." That evening, they joined the last delivery, a quiet trip to the city's west side, where a small community center still ran on borrowed time. They stacked boxes until the sun began to set, the orange light glinting off the truck's logos. Grace looked at him across the loading dock. "You know," she said softly, "when I paid for those candles that night, I thought I was doing something small." Jack smiled faintly. "Guess small things have a way of lighting up big rooms." They drove back together, the cab of the truck filled with silence that wasn't empty, the kind of silence that meant peace. Later, at home, Owen was waiting on the porch, a cupcake balanced carefully in his hands. "You're late, Dad," he said, grinning. "But I saved you a wish." Jack knelt beside him, lighting the single candle. The tiny flame flickered in the dusk. Grace stepped forward quietly, watching, the same woman who once bought those candles, now part of the home they illuminated. Owen closed his eyes and whispered, "I wish Dad keeps smiling." Jack laughed, glancing at Grace. "Think that one might just come true." As the 3 of them sat on the porch, the boy between them, the flame glowing against the night, Jack finally understood what his father used to mean. Kindness doesn't fade. It circles back, waiting for the moment when it can burn brightest again. And tonight, surrounded by warmth, laughter, and light, Jack Turner knew his moment had come. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.